Welcome to Easy Math TV. Here's another walkthrough video for Lab 8 in our series on statistics in the programming environment R using Posit Cloud. So we have all of our project files here that everyone has access to now, and you should be used to a lot of the routine at this point. So let's just get right into it. We're going to go into our inference for numerical data. So this is Lab 8, and we're coming up on the home stretch because there's only one more lab after this one. And I'm going to give you lots of time in class this week to work on this one and the previous lab on categorical data as well. So this one's a real fun one because we're going to be looking at the difference between two means, and you're going to have some flexibility, like you're going to be looking at a couple of different factors there. So again, the first thing that you really should do is open the HTML file and view it in a web browser and just read through that whole thing. I have gone through it all just to make sure that all of the code that you would need for making things like plotting, because there's a little bit of preliminary plotting that you have to do to try to just make sense out of the data. And then under the inference part, you're not only going to be doing a confidence interval, but we're going to be doing a hypothesis test on the difference between two means. So I made it a little easier for you and made sure that you have all of the R code that you're going to need. You don't even have to be going in and changing variable names like you did with the last one. All of the R code that you need is here. So really all I'm asking you to do is answer exercises 1 through 6. Make sure that you understand what your plots are showing you, and make sure that you understand what the output from these functions is actually telling you as well. So anyway, that's just your overview of your lab. And we're going to open the document that says inference2means.r, and that's all of the R code that's contained in that in those instructions. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is actually load our data, and this time we are dealing with birth weights of infants in North Carolina. So I'm not sure what hospitals the data is from, but there are 1,000 observations of 13 variables, and so that there's a lot of variables. So one of the things you're being asked to do is to take a look at the data set up here, and like I would recommend that you actually click on the little arrow in front of the NC, because NC is for North Carolina. Click on the little expansion arrow, and that gives you a list of all of your variables, and it actually tells you what their types are. So I'm not going to explain that. By now, you should be able to tell the difference between categorical data and numerical data. Like, by now we should be able to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a summary of all of our North Carolina data. So you can literally just type in summary parenthesis NC close parenthesis. Even though there's multiple variables, it's going to give you summary statistics for all of the variables that's possible to give you summary statistics for. So for some of them, you can actually see that like you actually have your 5-number summary. So for things that have a 5-number summary, I think you can kind of guess what type of a variable that is. But then you have other variables that only give you like what the number of outcomes that there were in for each response. So just as an example, under the variable named mature, it says it's a factor with 2 levels, and so we're dealing with it has something to do with the mother, the birth mother, and were they considered to be mature or were they considered to be younger? So there were two categories of that, okay? And you can see them separated into their two groups. So basically, this is just summary statistics, and I just want you to take your time and take a look at all of these and sort of familiarize yourself with the data that's in front of you. Let's go to our plots window, and I'm going to move this up a little bit because I want to make a couple of box plots with some of the numeric data. And I just chose these three variables. We are going to be dealing with birth weight, so that is definitely one of the ones. But I also would like to see a box plot for the father age as well as the mother's age. That is not. So MAGE is not a wizard. It is the mother's age, okay? Wizard in training. Okay. So there's one of the box plots for the weight. I think that's weight. And then here's the one for the mother's age. And here's the one for the father's age. So, that they appear in the order that you type them in. So the father's age was first, there's the mother's age, and there are the birth weights of the babies. And that's just overall birth weights. So at this point, you can answer question 1 because you have your data in front of you, and just read question 1 and see if you can just kind of glimpse up here in your environment. I think you have to look at the environment to be able to answer that question. For questions 2 and 3, we're going to be comparing the mean birth weight between smokers and non-smokers, and then also comparing the mean birth weight between white and non-white mothers. So the data does not really indicate for us, it doesn't tell us about the father in terms of like racial identity or ethnicity. That's something we don't have. But anyway, so what you see here is a side-by-side box plot so that you can make some comparisons, So these are the birth weights of babies to a non-smoking mother, and these are the birth weights of babies to a smoking mother. And they self-identified as that. And then we also have over here in the console, we have how many there were. So you have the number of non-smoking mothers and the number of smoking mothers. And then you also have the mean. So there's the mean for the birth weight for the non-smoking mothers. And here's the mean of birth weight for the smoking mothers. Okay. So, and then do the same thing for white and non-white. So I'm going to copy and paste. Hit enter. And again, we have our two box plots for birth weights separated by not white versus white. And then our averages are over here too. Our means are over here too. So there's the mean for birth weight for babies from a non-white mother. And here are the mean birth weights of babies that were born to a white mother. Okay? So those are the two means. And then these are the sample sizes. You had the not white mothers, there were 284, and the white mothers, there were 714. Okay? So those will help you answer questions 2 and 3. And then you need to answer question 4 on your own. That's just kind of setting us up for the inference that we're going to do, the hypothesis test that we're going to do. But you need to answer that first, because then we're going to actually conduct our hypothesis test. And that's just this text, R code that you see here. So inference on the birth weights, and we're separating it out by smoking versus non-smoking. So are those two birth weights actually considered to be statistically different? and we're going to answer that question. So I'm just copying and pasting here so you can actually see what the output looks like. And this is why that when you installed the inference function in the last lab, hopefully it's still there and you don't have to wait for it to download another 10 minutes. But you get a lot with it. So you're seeing what the area, the total of the two tails is for our test statistic. Okay, so when you plot your test statistic, and you look at the what is the area of the two tails of that test statistic, this tells you what that is, and then here's your you have the bar plots, or sorry, you have the box plots again. This time the box plots are filled in by a nice color and it's stretched out a little more. So I think it looks a little nicer. And here's all of your outputs over here. So I'm going to ask every one of you to look at this yourself and make sense out of what it is that you're being given here. This is definitely the difference between two means. We're talking about the difference between two means, and we have how many. It does tell us like how many values were in each category that are being separated out, and it tells us what the two sample means were. So the mean of sample 1 and the mean of sample 2, and then the standard deviation S of sample 1 and the standard deviation S of sample 2. So then we have the observed difference between the means, so that this is what they actually, the two means subtracted is equal to 0.3155, and so on. So there's your null and your alternate hypothesis. Here's our standard error, and here's our test statistic, and there's our p-value. So you're going to get that. All of that output is going to show up in your console every time you perform a hypothesis test. Okay? So repeat that same process for the birth weights when they are separated out by white versus non-white. Okay? So we're going to do that too. We're going to see if there's a difference between birth weights when we separate the babies born to non-white mom versus babies born to a white mom. And on the graph on the right, you can see that there is no shaded area, and that's because our p-value was actually equal to 0, because our test statistic, our z-value test statistic, is far enough away from 0 that it's off the graph. Okay. So all of the output is here. There's your standard error. Here's the number of babies born to non-white parents. Here's the number of babies born to white parents, or sorry, white moms. And here's your two means, and here's your two standard deviations. So everything's listed here. And the results of the hypothesis test are just for you to interpret. Okay. The last thing that you're being asked to do for this lab is to construct two confidence intervals. The confidence interval for the difference between two weights, two birth weights, when we separate them out by smoking versus non-smoking mom, and then what is the difference between two means when we separate them out by born to a white mom versus born to a non-white mom. Okay, so basically the difference between the population mean of non-white versus white, and then smoking versus non-smoking, like that is a difference, right? So we do have a sample difference, but is there a true population difference? And you're going to get a confidence interval for both of those. So if we just copy and paste that down here, I'm just going to show you what that output should look like. So this is what your output should look like there. And we get the same box and whisker plot each time. It does make that every single time. Every single time you use this inference function, you're going to get the box plot there. But this is what your difference between two means confidence interval looks like. So instead of giving you a p-value, it's still giving you the standard error, but then it tells you what the 95% confidence interval is. All right. And that's, so you have two of those to look at. So make sure you're looking at all of the output here. Scroll up so that you can see all of the output from those two functions, or just do one of them at a time. I don't care how you prefer to do it. But at least all of your R code is included here. You don't have to make any alterations to it. And it's just a question of you interpreting the information that you see and answering the exercises that are part of the lab. But I wanted you to be able to just run these functions yourself, just so that you could get a feel for how this is done, and stare at a couple more box and whisker plots, just so that you could, again, get a feel for the kinds of data that the kinds of output that you will see in those instances as well when we're dealing with numeric data. Okay? So like, subscribe, comment down below. I hope you're finding these walkthrough videos helpful, and I hope that you find the labs helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.